everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 97, giving you an insight of what we think is going to happen next week and review our analysis from last week's video. So starting off with gold. So what we saw from last week was pretty much a range bound price action market. Again, we were saying that price is probably going to push up once more, and then probably we're going to be looking into some sort of pullback sort of thing. So we can see that starting to develop now. I believe price did push up just a little bit before potentially turning over to this downside move. So what we could anticipate for this week is potentially just a little bit of a push lower. But what we want to try and do is look at some buying opportunities. I think that would be your better edge, because I think that we could be ending up around the 1900s level. So I think from here price could progress significantly higher. Again, it really just depends if price wants to reverse from this point. So again, nothing has to be absolute, but let's just say that this is now the price point where we're seeing the turnover. So for this week, I think we could arguably say that we are going to look at price potentially pushing lower and then looking to go higher within the week. So this obviously doesn't mean here by the drawings, doesn't mean that price will turn here at this exact point. It essentially just showing you just the generic picture or the generic idea that we're trying to look into. But ideally we want to see at least price get into the 1900s. So let's just see what happens with this pair. Okay, so moving on to Euro USD. So what we was suggesting from last week was price to potentially pull back and give us some continuation sales to the downside, but it really just didn't give us that. It completely sold off from the prior week. So 9th of November, that would have been your best entry. This nice little break down the low, and then we'll wait for this retest, and then bang, all the way down here. So again, if you did manage to hold on to that trade, a significant drop, a good 300 or so pips. But again, don't worry, because this trend to the downside, I believe, is pretty much soon going to be over. So now that we're essentially looking at a pullback here, I think you could arguably say that this was a nice opportunity to get in. But what I think needs to happen just a little bit more is just more of a significant push towards the upside. So what we're going to try and do is to see if price is willing to reverse now, just ever so slightly, maybe taking out 1.14 or even this high here. And we're possibly going to see price make one more push up before making its way to the downside. So we could even end up in 1.12 or even as low as 1.11. I didn't really think price would get this low, but yeah, significantly we are pushing lower still. So again, our bias towards the upside is still not really obvious just yet. We're still convinced that price is pushing lower. Again, if you have been following Euro USD, we were caught up here with potential long ideas, but it never really fulfilled out. And then from this break here, we continue to take some sells. So as you can see, if price does make a significant push to the upside, because as you guys know, we are kind of looking at this pair for aggressive long-term buys. And we're watching price to go hopefully to 1.23 in the near distant future, but not anytime soon, I guess, as price is still pushing lower. So what we're going to try and do is stick on to this sell bias and try and see if price really does want to push up towards the upside. But I still think price needs to recover some of this drop, so price could potentially make one more push up higher, and then we could arguably look at taking some sells still. So yeah, that's what I'm probably looking at for this week, is probably this sort of area here where price makes a way to upside, and then pretty much we're going to review if this is a really strong push. We could arguably say that we're going to look for the continuation trades, but if we start to see some kind of rejection on the upside, then we know that this is going to be a sell-off opportunity. So we're not going to be shy and get caught up in the long-term bias to the upside, because there will be multiple ways that we can get in on the upside if price does want to hold on the bullish sentiment. So just keep that in mind. Don't worry about this upside long potential. I overemphasize it a little bit too much, just purely because I'm excited for the next trend. But yeah, ideally we're looking for sells to the downside still. At this moment in time, I can't think of any reason why price would want to reverse just yet. So let's keep an eye on for Euro USD next week and see what happens. So Nzd USD, what we looked at last week was a potential drop lower, and then potentially price making its way to the upside. So we can see price is probably just trying to do this right now, but I'm not really too sure. At the end of this week, I was trying to see if this low here was going to hold, so at 0.70 was going to respect, but as we came to the end of the week, I wasn't really too sure. So what we could expect for next week is either a potential push lower and then a rally to the upside, or this low here at 0.70 is going to hold and we'll see a reversal. So I guess what we could do is just move things across, but essentially again we are looking to target the highs at even into 0.73, 0.72, but yeah, ideally what we're looking to do is to take on a continuation trade. That's if price really doesn't want to rally with us. Okay, so just keep that in perspective. Anything can really change from this point onwards, but yeah, let's see what is to come for Nzd USD. So targeting AUD USD, so this one is quite this one looks very bearish right now. So I've got some levels that I wanted to refer to. So we've got a zone here at pretty much 0.72, and what we were saying from last week is that we really, well, ideally we want to see price kind of reverse towards the upside, but judging by how price is just ridiculously falling and completely melting towards the downside, there's a strong possibility that we could take out 0.72 and potentially end up within this area here, so targeting this zone here, so roughly at 0.71 to 0.715, so around this point. So arguably we could get price to reverse, we could get price to tap into this range before rallying towards the upside. So let me just move this for a second, because this annotation here still remains valid as we spoke a very long time ago, but it's good that I've kept that there. But yeah, just touching on the 0.72 barrier. So if we start to see price just cut in here and we start to manipulate it, there's a strong possibility that we're going to then head into this zone here. So so the potential scenarios that we could expect for this week, okay, so we could get price to like I said, what we just said earlier, might as well just draw that in. We could get price to, if price starts to break the 0.72 barrier, there's a potential that we'll come into this area here, and then we could potentially see that reversal towards the upside. The other scenario is we'll get the reversal straight away through the week. So ideally what we would want to do is wait for price to show us that it's intentionally pushing higher, and again taking that buy. That's literally all we're going to be doing. So wait for that continuation, break higher, probably into 0.73, little retest, boom, continuation higher. But yeah, the two kind of barriers here. And then finally, just as a last kind of point that I wanted to touch on, is that in case that this whole leg does manage to break through this zone and even into 0.71, then all of our buy biases are going to be eliminated, and we're going to be looking at some retests as the downside. So potentially you're probably better off waiting for a video, but again, don't let that if the opportunity does arise for you to take a retest trade, take it. Again, I'll always be here next week, so to discuss the next opportunity that you can get in, so no worries if you do want to jump the gun a little bit. But yeah, just obviously be careful with your risk management and whatnot. So yeah, there's this trend line here. I want to get rid of that now. So we could arguably look at the downside trend connecting just 2 points, and I'm just going to look at this for now. This could be our way to interpret that price action may want to reverse towards the upside. Okay, so Just this doesn't mean it necessarily will. It just means that there's a potential. Again, remember that, because trend lines don't always really work. So just keep that in mind. So USD Jpy. So what we looked at this week was two scenarios. This scenario didn't play out. We didn't get any rejections from 114.5, so we can go ahead and get rid of this. Completely blasted through like so. So price action really didn't give us any idea to want to push higher. So what we're trying to see right now is that as prices cut towards the downside, is there a possibility that we could reverse towards the upside now? So this is where it may get a little bit interesting. So what we could expect is price to potentially drop lower. So this here, what I've got drawn is the second scenario. So the second scenario, while I've got it drawn already, is that if price just really wants to reverse and already breaks 115, then we're going to wait for a retest and then continuation. So that's the second scenario. Let me just push this to the side, sorry. Like so. But yeah, what we could expect is price to probably push just a bit lower and then make that reversal higher. So this would be your ideal entry points. Again, these are not to exact precision, but you know, this is just the general mapping of what I think could potentially happen. And then the third scenario, which is going to go against the buy bias, is if we break 113. So if we break 113, I'm expecting a retest. So we couldn't just move this zone here. So 113, like so, yeah. So we could expect pretty much a retest on this level and essentially move lower. So yeah, ideally this could be something that we're watching. We can probably get rid of this line now because we've pretty much started to violate it a little bit. But that 114 level was quite significant to me because we started to see a lot of rejections and support to resistance levels in there in that price action point. So again, we can see we're probably now best to try and find some opportunities in the market. So again, the buy bias is remaining valid unless we break 113. If we break 113, then we're going to be looking for selling opportunities. Okay. So moving on to Cad Jpy. So from last week we were looking for price to make a reversal. We could see that price did in fact do that. Nice sell-off point during the early hours of the Asian session. So we can see that the price completely bolted towards the downside. So what we could say now is we can probably get rid of these two scenarios now, and we can now focus on the second scenario, which is now that price has made that way to the downside, we could arguably look for price to potentially make its way to the upside now. So whether that price, you know, reverses from this low and bolts up higher, or if we come lower and then push higher, there's some scenarios that we could keep in mind. But again, ultimately we're trying to see if we can get back into the 93 zone. Okay, so essentially we're just waiting for some sort of reason to get in, I guess. So again, so the first scenario is just that price starts to respect this as the new low and we start to break higher. We'll wait for a retest and then look for those continuations higher. Okay, and potentially hit into 93. The other scenario is we don't get this to respect the low and we start to see price drop a bit lower, possibly into 90 again, maybe even 89.5, even into 89. Some areas just to think about, but expect some kind of, well, I'll be expecting some kind of rejection towards the upside because I'm following on from this strength of the upside. So this could just arguably look like some sort of pullback on a higher time frame. So if we draw out some kind of trend line for you to keep an eye on, that could be something that you could intentionally watch. So finally, we're looking into Euro Jpy. So what we're looking into for this pair, this one has been quite tricky. So what we're looking into for this one is there's a possibility that price could make its way to the downside, because we're ever so close to this level here. So we're just watching right now, but we did say from last week that we want to see price rally back into 134. So as price has gone ridiculously low anyway, like just judging from this price action point, there still needs to be some sort of pullback. So what we could anticipate is having a pullback, and if we do get a break of this level here, so essentially 128, there's a significant point where price we'll be looking for retest trades. Okay, so I guess for now what I really just want to do is just try and see if we can get some sort of pullback and then try and manipulate it from then on. I'm not saying necessarily it will go this high, but we could expect something like this. So whether that price, breaks this low and then pushes up, I don't know why I did that. So whether that price, breaks lower and then rallies up, that could be something that could happen, or we could just start to see, price completely do something like that. So they're the two scenarios for this. But to be honest, throughout all of the pairs, this is the only pair I'm kind of on 50-50 with. So this is probably not going to be a good trading idea. Well, probably a trade that we won't execute or look for this week. We'll probably just leave it on the sidelines, just because there's other pairs pretty much that are a lot better to trade, I believe, in my opinion. But anyway, we'll just keep an eye on that one. But yeah, there's a 50-50 kind of option there. So we'll just kind of go with the flow with that, and hopefully next week it's a bit more clearer for us. Okay. So for Aud Jpy, for this, what we're trying to again look for is pretty much this rally towards the upside. So we didn't really get anything of the nature from last week's scenarios where we started to get a pullback towards the upside. What ended up happening was, just pretty much fell off. Excuse me, towards the downside. So what I'm trying to see for now is to see if we can eventually get this rally towards the upside. So we can go ahead and get rid of these get the 83 zone out of the way. I think that we could start to see some potential moves towards the downside before taking a move towards the upside. So realistically, I'm looking for this kind of play. Again, what I'm looking at here also is the rally towards the upside too. So I'm looking at looking for price to essentially, if price does respect this low and reverses and starts to push up higher, I'm looking ideally for pretty much a retest trade and the continuation. So ideally we're still bullish, but don't get me wrong that this kind of still looks bearish for now. So there could be some small plays towards the downside, but again, long-term vision wise, I'm thinking more higher term perspective. So let's just kind of ideally wait for price to do its thing and then go from there. Okay. Moving on to USD share. So for this, what we were looking for is a sell off opportunity. We're still waiting for price to pretty much push lower. So I'm personally not convinced to take any buying opportunities just yet. Just not really that convinced with it just yet, because ideally this is quite an expensive price point. So what I want to see happen is pretty much we could start to look into 93 and see how it starts to react at this level, but I want to see price possibly turn over at some point, and we could then start to look at some sell-off opportunities to the downside. And as we know, we're probably looking into 91 area, which is a very long way down. So that's the long-term kind of vision for USD share. USD CAD, again, we're looking for the sell side opportunity. I think what we spoke about last week here was a possible buying opportunity. I didn't think that Well, I wasn't necessarily expecting this to hold. I was expecting probably price to push a little bit lower, but again, that's not a problem. That was just for a buying opportunity, but as we know, we're trying to look for sells. So we can see price is still pushing and pushing, and this was the second scenario that we had mapped out. So I probably will keep this on, because ideally I think that we could eventually start to see price turn over at some point. So whether that this respects as the new high and we start to break lower, then this could be a significant move for price to push lower. So ideally this is probably what we're going to look in for this USD CAD for this week. So we'll see what happens throughout this week. So that's pretty much all for this week. I'm actually going to probably do a few videos on some of the crypto. I can only think of Bitcoin right now. Let's just see. But again, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I do appreciate your time for listening. If you are interested in joining our trading group, we do have a link in, and that's in the description. So go ahead and click that. It's on Telegram. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thank you all for listening, guys, and we'll see you all on our next week's video.